We can't gather in person this year, but we've adapted. The 2020 Milwaukee Film Festival brings the best in film from across the globe and around the corner. And this year, it's all virtual, so the films and events are coming directly to you. Join us for the 2020 Milwaukee Film Festival, October 15th through the 29th. More information is at mkefilm.org/MFF.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Day 10 of the 2020 Milwaukee Film Festival presented by Associated Bank. I'm Kara. I'm the Artistic Director at Milwaukee Film, and I'm really thrilled to welcome all of you out there on the internet to this panel and discussion, the first of two sort of conversations that we're having live this afternoon in sort of honoring our centerpiece film, Coming Clean. This panel, Navigating the Opioid Epidemic, is going to sort of take a deeper dive into the issues and conversations of that film, and doing a little bit to sort of consider the local context here in Wisconsin. And then our masterclass that will be at 3:30 Central Time will sort of dig a little bit more into the career of the filmmaker, Ondi Timoner, who you will meet very, very shortly as well. So I hope everyone is fueled up for an afternoon of really invigorating conversation about the power of documentary for social change and to sort of create empathy and hopefully learn a little bit more about these topics together. I have a few reminders. The first is to make sure that you're casting your vote for the Alan H. Budd and Suzanne L. Seelig Audience Award. I know that it means a lot to filmmakers to receive your votes and potentially those awards. To vote, you will just go to watch.mkefilm.org with your ticket or with your pass and go to the film you want to vote for. There's a button there and you will see your ballot in front of you, and it will be counted at the end of the festival because your viewing is not all happening at this one moment. Please do vote. It means a lot to filmmakers to get that response. We also have a double up challenge this year. Thanks to the generosity of Richard Galloon and Judith McGregor, you can help us meet this goal. They've offered us $75,000 if we can raise that during the film festival. So now through the 29th, there's a couple ways you can help support us in that. You can text double up to 44321. You can donate on our website. That's mkefilm.org/donate. You can round up your purchase if you're buying tickets and passes still. If you round up at checkout, that gets doubled. A couple cents gets doubled. It's meaningful for us because if we achieve that goal, it really help us do all that we do year round. Additionally, members. Our members are our lifeblood. I see you all out there right now. You are helping keep us going through the difficult times of 2020 for our organization and helping us present conversations like this to you all for free. So I want to thank our members, and I want to encourage members to consider renewing. If your membership is up, that'll count toward our double up. Tell your friends, maybe consider gifting somebody a membership. If you think they would like to dig into what Milwaukee Film is doing, get free tickets and help support our mission, we would really appreciate that as we try to close this double up gap. As of this morning, we're about 75% of the way there, so it's looking good, but 75% is not 100%. So we got to continue making up that as we go. All of that aside, housekeeping done, I am going to turn the screen over to our moderator for today, Margaret Daun, who will introduce our panelists. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Carol. What an important moment for us to be talking about this topic today. And I'm so privileged and honored to be moderating this panel. Hopefully you'll hear very little from me and mostly from all of our panelists, whom I'd like to introduce to you and have them tell you a little bit about themselves. I'd like to start with the director of this incredible documentary, Miss Ondi Timoner. Please tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Hi there. Hi, everybody. Hope you're enjoying this great film festival. I'm just a film lover, a lover of the power of film to build a bridge from one world to everyone else's worlds, to just build empathy. And my whole life, films have done that for me. They have just allowed me to see underneath the news and to really understand whatever the subject matter is on a much more deeper on a much deeper level. And this film's no different. Coming Clean is a film that's changed my life personally and my understanding of addiction. It's been a 3-year journey that where I've met some of the greatest, most inspiring people I've ever met in my whole life, who I'm absolutely humbled by, who you're about to meet. But mostly it's about how to solve the opioid epidemic. How did we get here and how do we get out of it, both on a personal level and on a political level. And it's a film that I was passionate to take on because I didn't feel like there was any film like it out there that has hope and recovery embedded in it. And, it really always comes down to humans and our personal stories. And so it all started with meeting Destiny Garcia in a treatment center, and that led to Mayor McAdams, who's now Congressman McAdams. And it kind of went like that. I met Brittany Pedersen. Her story with her mom is extraordinary. And so it just became an unfolding journey, which I hope will help to change policy and save lives. And that's it. That's me.
Thanks so much, Ondi. Since you mentioned Destiny, let's go to Miss Garcia, if you don't mind introducing yourself to the audience.
Hi, I'm Destiny Garcia. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm a woman in long-term recovery. So I've been sober a little over 3 years now. I work at the Salt Lake County Mayor's office, and I also work at the treatment center I'm a graduate from, which is Odyssey House. I'm excited for everybody to see the film. It's really important, especially now with the isolation going on with COVID. And I'm excited to be here.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Destiny. Congressman McAdams, you were also mentioned by the director. Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. It's great to be with you today. I'm Ben McAdams. In the film, I was mayor at the time and met Destiny through some of the work we were doing to help people in addiction to have open doors to enter recovery. And Destiny has now become a dear friend of mine. And one of the highlights of this film that you'll see is just that relationship that I value so much that I formed with Destiny. And it's also has formed the basis of a lot of my work to help people in addiction to have hope and to see that people like Destiny can come through, and that to give hope to other people who are struggling.
Thank you, Congressman, and good luck in your upcoming election. Representative Pedersen, you are also mentioned by the director. Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brittany Pedersen, state senator from Jefferson County, Colorado. So happy to be joining you today. Unfortunately, my mom will not be with us for this interview. She's coming over later. We're celebrating her niece's birthday. So she'll be here soon, but she's going to miss this interview. So I got involved in this work because my mom struggled with addiction opioid addiction for 30 years. And as a policymaker, I tried to go on the front lines to solve one of the biggest issues facing our state, and have the unique personal perspective and experience with my mom on how absolutely insufficient everything that the access to treatment and recovery services and prevention services were in our state. So we were able to bring some huge policy changes in Colorado, and look forward to talking to you all.
Thank you, Senator. And Admiral, please introduce yourself and your connection to this film.
Hello, Maggie. I'm Sandy Winnefeld. I spent 37 years in the U.S. Navy, started out as a fighter pilot and ended up retiring as the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The reason I'm here and the reason I'm in the film is because my family and I lost our 19-year-old son 3 years ago to a fentanyl-laced overdose of heroin, accidental overdose on his 4th day of college. And we decided that in the wake of that terrible tragedy that we would start a national nonprofit we call SAFE, for Stop the Addiction Fatality Epidemic, safeproject.us if you're interested in checking us out. Because we felt we should continue what Jonathan had as a mission in his own mind, helping people who can't help themselves. So we wake up every morning trying to prevent families from experiencing the same loss we had. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. So let's start with the baseline question. I know, Ondi, you began to address this when you introduced yourself, but what brought you to this topic? What compelled you to make this movie? And you're muted, Ondi.
that.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't have the control of that. Thank you for unmuting me, whoever did. I, throughout my career, have made movies about what I like to call impossible visionaries, people who kind of take on the impossible, and they sometimes can act impossibly on their way to solving whatever problem it is, or making whatever vision they have real. And this film is no different. Everybody on here is an impossible visionary. Everybody you're looking at here is taking on something that seems impossible to solve. And when I was approached originally about the project, I thought to myself, let me look at everything that's out there and see if there should be a film about this. Like, what would this film contribute? And decided that, in fact, this film needed to happen because there was a real gap due to the stigma around addiction. In the marketplace. There was nothing in the media that addressed this from a really humanizing level. And yeah, it was all just needles in the arms and hopeless heroin addicts. And we've got this massive problem, leaving everyone, I think, with more fear and more hopelessness. When there are, in fact, people like Destiny, people like Stacey Pedersen, and countless others who are recovering from this epidemic, and they need more support. So for policy to change, we need to have a greater understanding that this can happen to anyone. It can happen to you. It happens to many, many people in every echelon of society. And so that's that was the impetus, was how can we, so we started in treatment centers. How can we kind of bring, hope and recovery? And then, yeah, it was about really finding the relationships between policymakers that were touched personally. And then through that, finding the solutions, which the solutions in this film are real. They can really happen, and they should happen. And I know Admiral Winnefeld is working really on the front lines with Safe Project to make naloxone more available, for example, which made for a radical depression and numbers of opioid deaths in 2018. But of course, they're way back up due to COVID-19. So we felt like the film should get out there as soon as possible, and hopefully every opioid subcommittee and governor can see it, as well as every recovering addict and the families of those addicts. So,
yeah, I think obviously the pandemic has been an incredible hardship and challenge for so many of us in so many ways, and particularly those struggling with addiction and recovery. So I just want to set it up for any of our panelists to address this moment, this particular moment in time, in any way that you want while we walk through this discussion this afternoon. Destiny, Ondi mentioned you finding recovery. I wanted to ask you about you finding your voice, about how to speak and where that strength came from. Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, well, I've always had a really loud mouth growing up. I always got in trouble for the loud mouth that I had. I've just now learned how to use my voice in a productive way. I've learned how to speak a lot better, how to present myself better, and to be loud, which I've always been loud. I'm just now loud in a productive way.
I think that's incredible, and I think a lot of women in particular struggle with finding a place of safety and comfort to express your voice, because so oftentimes when you are strong and loud, you're told to sit down and be quiet. So I applaud you, Destiny. Yes, girl.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to then turn to Congressman McAdams, and I wanted to ask you specifically, like, what brought your awareness up to the level that it did, and the courage that it took to really try something new in terms of reforms? And if you can share with people a bit about what those reforms look like and what you're trying to do in Congress as well, that would be great. Congressman?
Yeah, thank you. Our community, like so many communities around the country, was struggling with addiction. We had homelessness on the rise, crime related to addiction, and everybody in the community was clamoring to do something. I was mayor at the time. I think that this was maybe a crisis, not of my choosing by any means, but one that I happened to be in office, and the time expected me to step up and to do something about it. And so I wanted to, if I was going to dedicate my career, my time and effort to doing this, wanted to make sure we were doing it correctly. And so we pulled together a group and we spent a couple of years looking at our system, our criminal justice system, our homeless services system, to see where we were succeeding and where we were failing. And for me, all of this work culminated with, we were making some recommendations to our legislature to reform our system, to not just be a Band-Aid that we are putting people in jail, trying to incarcerate our way out of the problem, or to warehouse people in shelters and warehouse our way out of the problem. But what can we do to help people actually overcome the crisis? And we made this request to the legislature to refund and reshape our services. And they agreed, but with this caveat that they wanted me to be the one who personally was finding the location for the last homeless shelter we needed, which was, I think, intended to be a political death sentence for me. And I accepted the charge and thought, look, I've dedicated so much time to this already. I want to do it right. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to do it. And it's going to be my swan song of public service. And that's where I decided to go out and spend 3 days and 2 nights living on the streets and in our homeless services to understand firsthand what we needed to do to reform it. And I was all in and committed to making sure it happened. And we went through that process with thousands of people protesting. I was pretty convinced I would never successfully run for office again, because a lot of people were pretty upset about the decisions that I was being asked to make. And ultimately, we went through, I think people ultimately decided that it was good to have somebody who did something for the right reason, who put their name on the line. And I think we made some changes that made a difference. It was in that process that I met Destiny Garcia and so many other people like her. She is a voice for a large community of people who have been given a second chance, who have had opportunity to get treatment and to recover and are now giving back in ways that inspire so many of us. And so, I thought it would be the end of me, and really it was just the beginning. And I've met so many people in the process that just inspire me to continue to do this work and committed to follow through.
Congressman, I support and lift up your courage to lose an election, but to do the right thing. I think so many times our elected officials are more focused on their own personal interest in their reelection, as opposed to doing the right thing, even when it's really difficult. If you can share with all of our viewers what your website is for your reelection campaign, so that they know where to find you and where to give if they need to.
Well, I want to be really careful. We are just 10 days away from an election, so thank you for the interest. I'm going to not answer that question because I don't want to muddy the waters with the film festival. They can Google it, but I want to keep this focused on the film and the hope that we're giving to so many people.
Well, thank you for that, Congressman.
Yeah.
As you said, Google him, Congressman Ben McAdams. I'm then going to turn to Senator Pedersen. You were so brave to share what I can only imagine was an incredibly painful journey for you and your family, particularly as a politician and as an elected official. Can you talk a little bit about your own personal decision-making process to get that vulnerable and to become that transparent?
Thank you for the question. I would say, while it was really difficult for me to finally come out and talk about, when I first ran in the movie, you saw I talked about being a high-risk youth. I always ran on kind of being a latchkey kid and highly unlikely to succeed, but I had access to great schools and why education was so important to me, because it really changed my life. And so I talked kind of about my story, but I never actually talked about what that meant and why I was a latchkey kid and, somebody who was high risk. And I think that it was when I saw the policy failures at the state level, when I was fighting to save my mom's life and saw firsthand how broken the system was when she was begging for help. And so I felt like there was no other choice than to come out, and it was scary. It's hard to talk about. It was, I got an award yesterday, and I cried the whole time talking about our work together in Colorado, because it's been so personal for me and my family and our journey, but it's also been very healing to talk about our experiences and ultimately, trying to bring hope to others who are going through this, that it isn't a death sentence. It's actually, we know what we need to do to save these people's lives. I wish that my family and I would have known 30 years ago, and we would have had the support that we needed. And so our goal is to make sure that we reduce the amount of families and loved ones who are going through this, and stop the unnecessary lives from being lost every single day across this country, because we choose not to prioritize care, and we choose not to prioritize these people because of the stigma that exists. So it's a heavy topic, and I think that they did a great job in covering it to get into the weeds with the difficult subject area, but also, these stories of hope and what's possible and some of the solutions, but also reminding us that how many people we've lost unnecessarily, which unfortunately, that's part of these stories as well. So it was difficult, but the real courage is really with Destiny and my mom, to be able to talk about their personal experience with this disease, and to be able to do it so publicly. My mom, she says that it makes her feel like it's the only, that all of that suffering, that there was a meaning for it, that it brings, it makes her feel like her life has meaning now to help others. And so I think that they're the ones that were really the most.
Thanks so much for that, Senator. I think we use the word stigma. I often like to use the word shame, because we shame people, and we think that incarcerating folks is a pathway to social change, and it's simply not. I think this film takes an incredibly valuable look at that, and tries to reimagine a different way that isn't based on shame and stigma, and is really focused on what is the outcome that we seek as a society, and what is the best and most effective way to go about that. So again, I applaud and lift up all of your voices for helping in that effort. Admiral, I wanted to ask you, as someone who had quite a high-profile, extraordinarily important role in our government, what it was like for you and your family as your son was in his struggle, and how you decided to come and speak and be so public about it.
Yeah, it was a difficult journey in John's last, couple of years before we put him into long-term treatment. He was suffering, and we were trying to help him every way we could think of to help him. But ultimately, we realized that we couldn't keep him safe. He was suffering from anxiety and depression, and unfortunately was misdiagnosed as being ADD, and was prescribed Adderall, which is probably the worst thing you can give somebody who's got anxiety. And, that's what started him down the path of self-medication. He wasn't really a party kid, but down the path of self-medication that ultimately led to us having to put him in a treatment. And he did extraordinarily well in his 15 months of treatment, but we lost him shortly thereafter. And part of the problem we were up against is we only thought he had an addiction to alcohol and marijuana and maybe Xanax. We really did not know that he had an opioid problem. So we didn't know how vulnerable he was coming out of treatment, which is probably the most vulnerable time you have, because your opioid receptors have been reset. And if you use the same amount of the drug that you used when you were deeply addicted, you can easily kill yourself, which is what happened to Jonathan. So, and HIPAA kept us from understanding what was really up with Jonathan. He was 19 years old, and we were not able to know that he had an opioid problem. And then, to the heart of your question is we really did a little soul searching there on the couch 4 or 5 days after we lost him. And we just said, public enemy number one of this whole crisis is stigma, or shame, as you put it. But you know, the shame is the personal part. The stigma also extends into people who just don't want it in their backyard. They don't want to deal with it. They think that it's a moral failing rather than a disease and all that. So, and we felt that if with our profile and the like, if we stood up and said something, that people might say, gosh, if these people are willing to expose themselves, as it were, take that risk, that maybe it's okay to do that, that maybe there's something really going on here. And we've had a lot of people come up to us and say, hey, my brother this, my father this, my son this. And if we can open that door just a little bit through our own willingness to speak, then so be it. It's all for John.
Thank you, Admiral. I do want to take a brief moment to address the recent federal settlement that was announced this past week from Purdue Pharmaceuticals, because one of the pieces that is unique about opioids and these particular addictions, as I think Ondi did such a powerful and masterful job explaining in the film, this was an intentional crime committed by pharmaceutical companies. And they did so with the most base of objectives, to make money, and they did so knowing that it would cost lives. It was calculated, it was knowing, and to take such a callous calculation, there is not enough money in any settlement to ever undo that harm. And for those of you that don't know me, again, I'm Maggie. I am the general counsel for Milwaukee County. And in 2018, Milwaukee County sued opioid manufacturers and distributors. That $8 billion in the federal settlement, and it's $8+ billion that occurred this past week, does not address what happens in our local communities, which I think Congressman McAdams and Senator Pedersen have spoken to, but it's because it's in our local communities, it's in everyone's backyard, that we need to demand from our elected officials and our leadership actual solutions. I have seen so many task forces and more blue ribbon panels, but what we need is creativity and openness from our elected officials to hear what's actually needed in our communities. I wanted to ask you, Ondi, a bit about what your journey was in making the film and in experiencing these things with people, what that emotionally was like for you, and if there's any observation you can make about where your thinking was before you started making this film and where your thinking is now.
Thank you, Maggie. I want to say on behalf of Mike Moore, who couldn't join us, but is one of the lead prosecutors and represented several states and counties, including Salt Lake County, in this settlement with Purdue, that $8 billion is not actually going to be realized. It's more optics, unfortunately, because Purdue is bankrupt and they're going to be allowed to stay in business and remain functioning just to allow the profits to trickle in. But it's by no means a solution. It's not going to be that kind of money that actually gets put towards treatment, unfortunately. So it is really important that policy leaders do what they can and follow really Brittany Pedersen's example and what they've done in Colorado to make this happen in states across America. And that was, that was something that, this is not the emotional side. This is just more the egghead side of what I do, but I was just fascinated by what I learned about how we ended up in this situation. Both on a medical level, like understanding that pain is received by our brain, whether it's mental anguish or whether it's physical pain. Pain receptors in our brain experience pain. So if our back is injured, as it was with Stacey Pedersen, there's an underlying trauma from her childhood that's being treated by those same opioids. So the level of irresponsibility of these doctors to overprescribe. It really is, as you said, it's a profit over the welfare of people. And I think it's the greatest crime in the history of America, perpetrated on the American people. And it's unfortunately a product of our capitalist system, where it's just all about the bottom line and money. And yeah, it doesn't matter, again, as I said, like what rank you have in this society of ours, you will be touched by this disease because it's so prevalent. And so I think on an emotional level, what I felt personally coming out of these treatment centers and out of these sessions, I learned the most, obviously on an intellectual level from Mike Moore, from McAdams, from Brittany Pedersen, but on an emotional level, I learned about transparency, and something that I practice a lot of. That's how I make documentaries, pretty good documentaries, is because I'm a very transparent person, I think, and I'm very real in my exchanges. So what you see is what you get. That's just not the case a lot, unfortunately, in our society. People are ashamed. They're ashamed to say that they have a problem. And 80% of people addicted to opioids are walking around hiding that because they're scared they're going to lose their job or lose their loved ones. And so we have to reduce the stigma. And emotionally, I just felt like we all need treatment. I left these treatment centers just humbled by people picking themselves up from absolute zero or even below zero, where we'd be so tempted to give up, and they're not giving up. They're not giving up because they can go on and become productive citizens who are tax-paying citizens, and they don't have to be drains on our system. They can go back and rebuild their lives like Destiny has, and they know that. And I think we don't know that, and we don't know how to just be real as people, unfortunately, and how to take care of each other as well as we need to in our society. And that's why we have so much, we have so many underlying health conditions that continue to happen, and mental health conditions below everything, which we need to address. I'm sorry for the long answer, but yeah, I hope that that answered some part of your question.
Thank you so much. I think there's a powerful line that's pulled through the film that really starts to address what you framed up, I think, really nicely. And I want to ask you, Destiny, next about this. And our society has become so much more isolated. And in this moment of this pandemic, even isolating to this incredibly acute degree. And it's explained incredibly well and intuitively in the film that we don't just need clean air and water and a roof over our heads. As human beings, we need connection. We need to feel valued. We need to feel supported. And there's so much of the way that our healthcare is delivered, which doesn't value mental health care much at all. So many, if you're fortunate enough to have health insurance, there are incredible limits on your ability to access mental health support systems. And so, Destiny, I wanted to ask you, as you've been on this journey of recovery and hope, how do you view the system? Where do you see the gaps? And how have you helped lift people up to find different access points to support themselves from an entire wellness perspective? Not just our bodies, but our minds, our hearts as well.
I think that it's important to meet people where they are. So if that means you're going out to a homeless outreach, you're going to meet the community exactly where they are and provide them resources that they normally wouldn't get if you did not show up to where they live, where they are. So I think it's important to meet people where they are in all aspects of recovery, in every field of recovery. So when you're in a treatment center and then you go out to sober living, and I think that the gaps between going from detox to treatment center is very important. Most detox centers, you only get 3 days or 7 days of detox, and then you have to wait for a bed for a treatment center.
Yeah.
And those people in that moment, when you're done detoxing, your brain is still an addict, a very functioning addict brain. And the first thing you want to do is go get high. You don't want to wait a month or two to get into a treatment center. So I think that gap needs to be closed. I think the access to sober living is really important. It was important for me to go from a very structured treatment center into a mildly structured sober living center. I think the structure is very, very important. So I think the access to sober living would be great for everybody that's transitioning out. And then I think employment is huge. If you are working on your insides and you are going to apply for jobs, and I did this over and over and over again, and you get let go because of your background or because you have a drug history, these people who have worked so hard to overcome this are never going to overcome it if we don't have employers willing to give them a second chance. If I didn't have Ben McAdams giving me a second chance, I wouldn't be where I am today. Before then I was working at Build-A-Bear, which is the only place that would hire me at $8 an hour or $7.25 an hour and 10 hours a week. There was no way I was going to be able to support myself and my unborn child at that time. And I was in sober living if I didn't have an employer give me a chance. And then once he did, I relearned all the skills that I already had. Like I was already a great human being. I already knew how to answer phones. I already knew how to de-escalate. But given the opportunity to shine has been amazing. So I think employers offering people employment, regardless of their background, is really, really important.
I think what you're framing up for us so well, Destiny, and thank you for sharing that, is that human dignity is so fundamental. And I think so many of our systems aren't built around that central affirming concept that we need to be lifting up human dignity no matter what someone's setbacks are. And there's so many reforms that we could talk about. But certainly I do want to just give a shout out to this. Every state should be looking at ban the box legislation. And that is the legislation that will prevent employers from requiring you to disclose your prior criminal history. If someone has served their time and done their work, let's allow someone the opportunity to restore their dignity. We're coming up closer to the top of the hour. I wanted to particularly ask each of you, as we have touched on some policies and gaps in our system, I wanted each of you to address what you hope each viewer of this film takes away and what you also view as one of the more important reforms or commitments that we need to make as voters, as we're coming up on an election, and as a society. So again, what is the key takeaway that you see that you want people to take from the film? And then what is something that each of us can do as a citizen, as a voter, in terms of policy and reforms? And Senator Pedersen, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you.
Great. Well, I would say prioritize voting for your voice matters across the country, and especially if you're in Utah, there supporting our friend Ben. But I would say supporting progressive candidates that are going to prioritize access to quality, affordable healthcare. That is such an essential piece of this. And Congressman McAdams talks about right now the ACA that expanded access to medication-assisted treatment, to Medicaid expansion, to ensure that people who are still living in poverty have access to healthcare. That is on the line right now because of the Supreme Court nomination. So there's so many things that are happening right now that are going to take us in either direction. So I would say vote and support progressive candidates. And in terms of what they should take away, I hope after watching this is, if you have somebody in your life, if you're somebody, most people who want to watch this are probably connected to it in some way. They have a best friend who they lost, somebody in their family, maybe they're struggling themselves. And I hope that they leave knowing after watching this that this is a disease. It's a brain disease. Your brain changes shape, physical shape, and it takes a long time to heal. And without the right treatment and the right, the continuum of care that Destiny talked about, really meeting people where they are and making sure that we're supporting them, not only with just 7 days of detox, and then maybe they have to wait for treatment, they're highly likely to die from an overdose in that time. And then we can't also just kick them out of treatment and put them on the streets homeless. We have to have transitional support. It's part of the recovery time period that's so critical to ensuring that they're successful. And so it's really getting at every single one of those buckets. And so I hope you leave knowing it's a disease that we can treat this. We do have the answers. This is not the hopeless situation that we have all felt, because we just didn't have people that cared to prioritize this at the state and federal and local level. And it's time. This is the #1 cause of death for people under 50. It's going to be even worse because of COVID. It has never been more urgent. And so we need to demand action. I hope that you reach out to the people in your life who maybe you pushed away because it was too hard, to let them know that you love them and that you're there. And if they have the right treatment available, anything is possible.
Thank you so much, Senator. I think one of the things I'd like to elevate and pull up from what you said is that recovery and hope is a really long-term process, right? That the brain has changed and it takes so long to heal. And our systems are basically built around detox, right? It's detox and then let folks go and see what happens. And that's just not the way addiction works. And so when Destiny says, when Senator Pedersen says, meet people where they are, that's not just a physical thing. It's understanding what recovery looks like, and let's build systems that actually meet people where they are and meet their recovery needs.
If
Admiral,
I can add, Maggie,
please.
Sorry. We actually save money by doing this too. This is one of these unbelievable policy situations where if we actually invest in the right areas, we save lives and we save money. And so it doesn't make sense what we've been doing. We've been letting people die, which has cost us so much more in the long run at every level until, we ultimately lose them unnecessarily. And so it's urgent. It's urgent in every way possible, and we have to do better.
Thank you, Senator. Admiral, what do you think is a takeaway that you want to be sure people have from this film, and what would be your call to action to voters and citizens in this moment?
Sure. The first thing I would say is it's really important to understand that there is not one single lever you pull that ends this crisis. It's an incredibly complicated problem that requires incredibly complicated solutions. And those solutions fall into we need to raise public awareness so we can lower stigma and we can get the support behind the solutions we need. We need to do full spectrum prevention, which is about credible voices talking to the most vulnerable audiences. We need to get our prescription medicine programs under control, which includes teaching doctors and dentists about the hazards and getting them to buy into this. We also need to make sure that our medical response is correctly configured, which includes having a lot of Narcan out on the street, having buprenorphine available so that we can get people getting their cravings under control. It means having law enforcement and justice, as you alluded, and you're an expert on this. We're not going to arrest our way out of this problem. So we have to enhance our drug courts. We have to help people who are incarcerated, both while they're incarcerated and as they transition out of incarceration. And we need to dramatically enhance treatment and recovery resources, make those available through insurance and the like. And then we need to help our families who are dealing with all of these problems. And there's a lot of detail inside those things that we have to do, such as, hey, welcome treatment and recovery centers into your neighborhood. Don't be stigmatized by that. Give harm reduction a chance. Get rid of your own excess medications that are in your prescription medicine cabinet, because 4 out of 5 heroin addicts started with prescription medicines. It also means teaching your kids about the hazards, the true hazards of, these are not your parents' drugs. These are extremely hazardous drugs, and they're getting laced with fentanyl, and you may not know it. You can die on your first try, not just your 20th try. And it also means, as Destiny pointed out, doggone it, hire somebody who's in recovery. These people have been through hell. They have survived it, and they're some of the most trustworthy people you'll ever find because they really want to live and they really want to survive. And do everything you can if you find somebody who's struggling to give them the support and the love they need to get through this, because that's what it takes. So hopefully that's only a small subset of the solutions that we have to go for if we're going to win this thing, but we can win it.
Thank you, Admiral. And we must win it. I just wanted to give a little bit of emphasis to hiring those that have been incarcerated, those who have struggled with addiction or in their phase of recovery and hope. I'm now a manager of a department, and I look for people that have endured and survived and have that resiliency, that have that humility, but also the daring do of moving on. Those are folks that I want on my team every day. So I just want to lift that up. Let's hire folks that have been incarcerated. Let's hire folks that have survived their addiction and are in recovery. They will be an integral part of your team. Congressman McAdams, your thoughts as we come up on the top of the hour.
Well, I just want to say, to echo what Brittany was saying, if compassion and the circumstances of this film don't motivate you and hope, it is also the right thing to do fiscally. Destiny is paying taxes and raising her daughter and giving back to our community in so many ways and helping to lift others. And so we come out so far ahead by helping people to heal than incarcerating or warehousing. And so treating people with the dignity that they deserve as human beings, we get that back. And I just want to say Destiny highlighted a couple of the key successes that we found here was that it's not only opening access to treatment, but it's taking a longer term view. So as Destiny was finishing her treatment, there was a sober living bed available for her. She wasn't ready to be thrown out into the wild, wide open without, some support. And then it was a job. And now she's lifting people up and helping others on their path to recovery. But that some of those things that made it possible for Destiny and so many like her to succeed and to lift themselves up are in jeopardy today. Brittany mentioned a case pending before the Supreme Court that would throw out the Affordable Care Act, would throw out millions of people who are relying upon that. The way that we were able to expand access to treatment was through Medicaid expansion made possible through the Affordable Care Act. That is in jeopardy and weeks away from maybe being thrown out. It is a critical time, I think, to make sure that our elected officials, Republican and Democrat, know that that is the right thing to do because of a loved one, a family member, a coworker, a friend. But it's also the right thing to do with our tax dollars. And let's not lose the progress we've made. There are so many people out there that Destiny right now is helping to lift up, but they need to make sure that those doors are open to them.
Thanks so much, Congressman, and good luck next week. Destiny,
thank you.
Final thoughts that you'd like to share?
I think when you walk into this film, or maybe when you walk away from this film, you walk away more educated. I know I lived the life, but I also walked away very more educated after watching this film. And it took me 2 or 3 times to watch it and get all the information it has. It's packed with information. It's packed with love and hope. And it's one of those films that I hope that people who are struggling can see that they can recover, that they can recover in a short period of time if you are dedicated, and that it educate people to keep opioids out of their home, to keep them away from their children. I hope doctors don't prescribe as much as they've been prescribing. I have a list of hopes. I have tons of hopes. But just see this film and walk away with some love and some hope in your heart. And then do something with that love and hope to try to change the opioid epidemic.
Roger that, boss. And step 1, vote on November 3rd. And we're going to close out this incredibly powerful and I hope uplifting panel with you, Ondi. What do you want people to take away from this film that you've made?
I mean, I think it's very difficult as a filmmaker to know how to leave people when you're dealing with a massive social issue with a sense of what they can do. That was my challenge making my climate change film too. It was like, it's just an overwhelming problem. And so I think echoing what all of the heroes in this Q&A are saying, it's about connecting. Connection is the opposite of addiction. And this is a time of great isolation. Pick up the phone and call someone that you haven't talked to in a while. Talk to the person on the street. Have them feel like a human being for a minute there while you're talking to them. Find out what's going on. Just realize that we need to reach across and touch one another, especially right now, and definitely vote. Yes, definitely vote. But more than anything, I really hope that people also, I want to say the website is comingcleanmovie.com. I hope that whether or not you've seen the film, you share it, because people are hiding the fact that they're dealing with this problem personally. People are scared to talk about it, and this film will hopefully inspire them to be louder in their recovery, or if they're not recovered yet, to come out and say it, or to help people that they've judged otherwise beforehand. So, yeah, thank you for having us as well.
Well, thank you to the Milwaukee Film Festival. I want to thank Ondi, the director of this incredibly powerful film, that, as Destiny said, Ms. Garcia, it is dense. You're going to need to watch it 2 or 3 times to let it all soak in.
I do have that problem. Yeah. Pack it in.
That's great movie making, Ondi.
Okay.
I want to thank Ondi Timoner. I want to thank Ms. Destiny Garcia, Congressman McAdams, Senator Pedersen, and Admiral Winnefeld. Thank you all for sharing very bravely your experiences and being willing to be vulnerable. I think part of human connection is being vulnerable. And as we've all said, to all of you that are watching, please vote. Make a plan to vote. Make sure your friends have a plan to vote. And let's get it done on November 3rd. Thanks much to Milwaukee Film Festival.